All right, let's jump right in. We're going to tackle a massive question today. When a disaster strikes, what is it that separates a government that totally nails the response from one that just collapses? Turns out there are two critical ingredients that make all the difference.
I mean, think about it. You've seen this play out on the news, right? A massive hurricane, a global pandemic, a sudden terror attack. The crisis hits, and in one country, the response is quick, it's organized, it's effective. But somewhere else, facing the exact same kind of threat, it's just pure chaos. So what's the secret? What's the hidden variable here?
Okay, so here's the deal. The research we're diving into says that success in a crisis isn't about luck, and it's not about any one single thing. It's actually more like a recipe. And that recipe needs two very specific and equally important ingredients to work. So, ingredient number one is what we call capacity. This is the nuts and bolts of it all. This is the raw power of a government to get stuff done. It's all about the how. How do you actually mobilize resources, organize people, and execute a plan when everything is on the line? So, governance capacity, what does that really mean? Well, you can think of it as the machinery of the state. It's all the government agencies, the official procedures, the funding, but, and this is the important part, it's not just about what's written down on paper. It's about how that machinery actually works, or doesn't work, in the real world, under incredible stress. And we can break this capacity down into four key types. You need analytical capacity to actually understand the threat, you need regulation to maintain control, and you absolutely need delivery capacity to get services to the people who need them. But you see that first one, coordination capacity? The source material says this is the single biggest hurdle. Getting the police, the firefighters, the health services, maybe even the military to all work together seamlessly, that is so often the point where everything falls apart. Okay, now for our second ingredient. This one is a little less about raw power and much more about something, well, something a bit more human. It's called legitimacy. This isn't the how, this is the why. Why should people listen to you? Why should they trust that your plan is the right one? So governance legitimacy is all about public perception. It's the trust, the confidence, the moral approval that we, the citizens, grant our government. Think about it. A government can have all the resources and all the plans in the world, but if the people don't believe that its actions are, desirable, proper, or appropriate, then all those plans are basically useless. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. Capacity is the power to act. It's what a government is physically capable of. But legitimacy, that's the right to act. That's the permission slip the public gives you, built on a foundation of trust. And you absolutely have to have both. One without the other is a recipe for disaster. So this brings us to the most fascinating part of all of this, how these two ingredients actually interact. Because success isn't just about having high capacity and high legitimacy separately. It's about how they come together to solve a really specific problem, something called the expectation gap. And this quote from the source material just nails it. The success or failure of any crisis response comes down to the size of that gap. The gap between what the government actually does, that's its capacity in action, and what the citizens expect it to do, which is all rooted in its legitimacy. The whole game is to make that gap as tiny as possible. And this table just makes it crystal clear, right? When what the government does lines up with what the public expects and trusts, boom, success. It's seen as a good performance. But when there's a mismatch, when the response feels totally out of step with what people think is right or needed, it is seen as a failure. And that's true no matter how much money was spent or how many resources were used. But of course, the real world is messy. There's no single perfect formula that works for every single crisis. A terror attack needs a totally different response than a flood, right? This means the best systems aren't rigid. They're adaptable. They can find the right mix of tools for the specific challenge that's right in front of them. And a huge part of that mix is how you coordinate your response. On one hand, you've got a traditional top-down hierarchy, like a military command. That's fantastic for clear, decisive action. On the other hand, you have a more flexible network model, where different groups cooperate and share information. This is way better for those super complex, unpredictable crises, what researchers call wicked problems. So, what's the real answer then? Well, the source suggests that the most effective approach is usually a hybrid. It's a system that can be decisive and top-down when it has to be, but can also be flexible and collaborative when the situation calls for it. It's all about having the right tools in your toolkit and, more importantly, knowing which one to use and when. So let's just boil this all down. What are the big takeaways here? First, you need both ingredients for success: the capacity, the power to act, and the legitimacy, the public trust that gives you the right to act. Second, the name of the game is closing that expectation gap between what the government does and what its citizens demand. And finally, flexibility is everything. The systems that win are the ones that can adapt to whatever crazy thing the world throws at them.
And that leaves us with one last really important question. Because, let's be honest, the next crisis isn't a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So when it gets here, what are we going to demand? Are we just going to settle for a government that has the power to act? Or are we going to demand a government that has also earned the right to act with a response we can actually genuinely trust?